Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Development Management Committee. I'm Councillor Kieran Bowker, the chair of the committee. Before we start the meeting, I need to make the public aware of the following. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm goes off, please make your way out via the nearest fire exit and assemble in front of Runnymede Hall. Members of the committee, meetings of the committee, should I say, are webcast and broadcast on the internet. If you're seated in the public area of the council chamber, it's possible that your image will become part of the broadcast. And lastly, as per, could I ask everyone to switch their mobile phones to silent? May I ask the Development Management Committee members are present, seated in the chamber in the front row of me, to introduce themselves, stating your name only, starting on my left.
Good evening, my name is Councillor Peter Gregg. I'm Vice Chairman of this committee.
Councillor Alan Acott.
Good evening, Councillor Carol Sage.
Good evening, Councillor Grace Watson.
Good evening all, Councillor Rob Lillis.
Good evening, Councillor Gareth Howlett.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Russ Savage.
Councillor Jackie Thornton.
And Councillor Tom Skip.
Thank you. May I ask the officers present to introduce themselves, again starting on my left.
Keith Zammit, Planning Officer.
Good evening, Stephen Garner, Assistant Director for Development Services.
Good evening, Sonia Worthington, Democratic Services Manager.
Good evening, David Bland, Legal Advisor to the committee.
And lastly, may I ask any other members present to introduce themselves?
Steve Sates, Canvey Island Town Council.
Thank you. Councillor.
Councillor Sharon Ainsley, St Mary's Ward.
My sincere apologies, Councillor, for omitting you. The first item on the agenda is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence? There are none. Item 2 is members' interests. Are there any interests, members? Item 4 is public speakers. There are no public speakers. Item 3, which I almost missed again, are the minutes for the Development Management Committee's meetings held on the 5th and the 9th of March 2024 agreed. Agreed. Item 6 is Walsingham House, Lionel Road, Canvey Island. I'll now hand over to the Planning Officer to present this item.
Oh, thank you very much and good evening. Right, Walsingham House on Lionel Road. Now this might look familiar and that's because it is. The committee have dealt with the planning application on this site before for physically what is the same development. We've got, just to orientate you, Lionel Road is running along there at the bottom of the site. This is what used to be a convent, and this former building, which was last used as a kind of a retreat centre, has been demolished, and apart from this building over here, I think the site's been cleared now. This shows, I'll come on to the layout perhaps in a little more detail in a moment. Here's an aerial photograph of the area. So just showing you where the former building's been demolished and the St Joseph's School to the north. You can see a couple of like house bases that are here. That's because the phase 1 of the scheme, which was for 9 houses, that has now largely been constructed, which there were 2 properties about here and then another 7 properties along the frontage of the site. This is what's gone up. So fairly traditional looking 2-storey properties. So phase 1 of the scheme is these 7 along the front plus these 2. Now that received planning permission, and they've all but these 2 here, they've been built. Those 2 and those 2 now appear to have people living in them. There's 3 here that have been constructed but not quite occupied yet. This scheme now seeks to add a further 20 houses and 13 flats in what we're calling phase 2. Now there's quite a mixture of property types proposed. I won't show you every single house type that's there, unless you really want me to, but suffice to say, this is an example of some semi-detached houses that are proposed as part of the scheme, 4 bedrooms. There's also detached houses proposed, again, sort of 4-bedroom properties with a garage. We've got some smaller houses which are 2 bedrooms, again more like kind of starter homes, I suppose you'd call them. And onto the blocks of flats that are proposed, we've got 2 locations. I'll flick back here for a moment. There's a block here which has got 8 in, and a block here which has got 5 in. So flat block A is this. It's 2 floors, but the ground floor is actually slightly raised, like to be above flood levels. That's a fairly conventional layout, I suppose you'd say. Just 4 flats on the ground floor and 4 flats on the first floor. The flat block B, which is a little more weird and wonderful, it's quite an interesting floor layout actually. The ground and the first floors are actually maisonettes, and I appreciate that is rather small scale, but they've each got a downstairs and an upstairs, and then at roof level there's kind of a penthouse, if you like, which has got 2 bedrooms and a living, kitchen, dining and bathroom all on the second floor. There's actually no access onto these. These aren't doors. It's just a window with a flat roof. Right. So let's have the layout on the screen again. Now, it was previously refused planning permission. So you might wonder what it's doing here again. The applicants decided to have another go at putting the application in. We refused, the council refused planning permission for 3 reasons last time. There was a reason to do with the impact on badgers not being adequately mitigated. These areas here that say, I appreciate the writing's quite small, but it says retained for ecological purposes. Provided that those are not interfered with during development and adequately protected, that we don't feel there's going to be an adverse impact on badgers. There will be some impact because if you've had a look through the report, it explains that there's one of the sets will have to have quite a lot of its entrances closed. But it's kind of unusual. There are other sets on the site which are currently not being used by the badgers, but which they have used at one point in time. And what the developer can do is temporarily close the set that's being used. The badgers will then be able to use the existing sets they've made, and then the main set can be reopened in its amended form with some of the entrances closed off, which sounds all a bit a bit convoluted, but I'm told that's something that's quite doable. The second reason permission was refused was a lack of on-site parking for the flats, so over here. The 13 flats each have an allocated parking space in this area, plus there is visitor parking, 3 spaces there, and another 2 visitor parking spaces just around the corner. Now that is consistent with what the council generally approves in terms of parking for flats. We, in sustainable locations where they've got good access to the town centre, good access to bus services, we would advise one parking space per flat, would be suitable. Whereas parking standards say 2-bedroom flats should have an additional parking space. Where you've got sustainable locations such as this, the government is really telling us that car parking's not an efficient use of land. We should be trying to get as much development as we can in sustainable locations where people can choose to live without a car if they want to. And the third reason was to do with the density and quantum of the units and a lack of open areas for recreation within the site. Yes, while open areas for recreation, play space and that type of thing are nice to have in new developments, this isn't a greenfield site where it's viable to retain such areas. It's a site that's got development on it already, so there's costs for the developer in removing existing buildings and getting it to a condition where it's ready to develop. And it just isn't viable for them to leave areas undeveloped where they can provide play space. They have to develop pretty much, the whole developable area of the site. They're already losing out on some development capacity because of the areas they're retaining for badgers. If we were to say, we want this block of houses knocked out and a children's play space provided, well, then you just wouldn't get the development happening. It just wouldn't be viable. And if the council wants to try to protect its greenfield sites on the edge of town, we really need to be developing, urban sites within the town, such as this one. And if we start saying, we want play space on site, well, we're going to be frustrating that effort. So I suppose really it ticks the boxes. It's a brownfield site. It's got quite a good mix of properties on the site as well, because you've got, flats all the way up to 4-bedroom detached houses. So as officers, it's really quite hard for us to find a reason why we'd say no to it. If I just bring you onto the recommendation quickly, I've put out a little note about conditions. Now, condition 4, it talks about submitting details of how the developer's going to notify all the surrounding neighbours and that kind of thing. That's a sort of something that's been carried over from the last officer report that was prepared. On reflection, we feel that is perhaps slightly onerous on the applicant. This is page 31 of the report that's in front of you. On reflection, condition 4, it's not something we normally ask developers to do, providing details of how they'll tell neighbours about building work and that kind of thing. There's a construction management plan with the scheme which covers all the sorts of usual minimising impact on the residents through dust suppression, not doing noisy activities too early in the morning and that kind of thing. With the qualification of condition 4 being deleted, I'm hoping that members will be able to support a recommendation of approval for this site. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Keith. As this application is on Canvey Island, would the Canvey Island Town Council representative like to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. We had a meeting on Monday, the 26th of February 2024, and the Town Council resolved to object to the proposed development for the following reasons. Inadequate parking provision for staff, healthcare professionals and for any potential visitors. The committee felt that it was a cramped development. The entrance and exit for large vehicles to this development by means of Convent Road and Lionel Road will impede traffic movement on already busy, narrow roads. The new build fails to provide adequate on-site parking provision for the number of flats and houses being built. As such, the proposal would likely to lead to additional parking in neighbouring roads. the Essex Badger Protection Group strongly objected to the development, but now that I see that this has been sorted out. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions for the planning officer about the planning application? Please note this is a member's opportunity to seek clarification from the planning officer on any matters they are unclear of regarding this application. Members should, of course, refrain from making statements about their views on the proposal. These should be expressed in the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Thornton.
Thank you. In the report, you've referred to, regarding parking, the 2011 census information on car ownership. And you've said that that's the latest data that's available. But we've actually got the 2021 data available. And that seems to have a different outcome. Can you tell us why that's not been used?
Yeah, that's not something that has been available to me. I wasn't aware of that.
Could I'll come back to you, Councillor. Councillor Lillis.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Keith, 13.22. Noting the safeguarding concerns raised in 13.22, can you show us how the developer has designed the flats at the rear of the block so that the windows do not now overlook the pool of adjoining St Joseph's Catholic Primary School? Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's flat block A. So, well, flip back to the site plan for a minute. So this is the one we're talking about. Since swimming pool's here-ish. So, yeah, these windows, they're kind of set in with reveals, and that prevents a view northwards. So, yeah, that's the overlooking the school swimming pool. And also the windows are slightly angled as well. So hopefully that, does that clarify?
Councillor Sage.
Thank you, Chairman. What I am concerned about is Lionel Road is a very narrow road. There are parked cars down there, and I'm very concerned about construction traffic getting through. And I'm also concerned once the site is built, the traffic's going to be absolutely horrendous down there.
Was there actually a question?
Yeah, there was, sorry. What are you going to do to mitigate, what are you going to do to mitigate the impact on the surrounding area with the building traffic coming in? Can't think of the words.
In this kind of situation, it's fairly standard for the developer to submit a construction management plan. And in those documents, they outline how they're going to try to keep deliveries to not being at unsocial hours. Sorry?
Or during rush hour.
It's a tricky one, that. Building sites tend to want deliveries of materials like quite early in the morning so they can start work, so they tend to be on site about 8 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah, making them have deliveries in the middle of the day, we probably couldn't insist on. Just being practical about it.
Could you not insist so deliveries, say, from 9 till 3, 2, something around that time?
You'd like deliveries between 9 and 3 or not between 9 and 3?
Yeah, I'd like deliveries between 9 and 3, not during the rush hour, because it's going to be horrendous.
I do agree it would be nice. I don't think we can insist on it because, as I say, they tend to want their deliveries first thing in the morning.
Councillor Savage.
Yeah, I've got quite a few questions on this, but I'll go one at a time, obviously.
If you could limit yourself to a couple so we can get...
No,
I'll come back to you, obviously.
Do one at a time, Chair. So the original proposal was passed in 2019, so it elapsed, and then there was a modification to it later on, which was knocked back. What I really want to understand is what has changed in this proposal from the one that was knocked back recently. Because that isn't really clear to me exactly what I've read. That there's a difference in numbers slightly and some parking spaces, but is there anything major that's changed in that application since it was knocked back?
The physical development, the applicant is basically asking the council to reconsider the scheme. There are some differences in monetary terms. Last time, the applicant offered a affordable housing contribution of £555,000, and that was for the council to assist the council in progressing its affordable housing projects on all the old garage sites and whatnot. They came in this time saying it's not viable for any affordable housing because construction costs and all that have gone up. But as you probably know, we like to have these things independently checked. We don't just take it at face value. And the consultants that we'd used came back and said, actually, it is viable to make a contribution. Not as much as last time, but once everything had been factored in, it came back at about 74,000. And then, so we put that to the developer and they said, yes, okay, we'll offer you that contribution that you're asking for. So yeah, affordable housing is an area where there's a difference. The contribution is a bit lower, but physically, it's effectively a reconsideration.
Councillor Thornton.
Yes, thank you. You made comment earlier on about under the play areas that it was expensive to demolish the properties, but have you got a picture of the before and after? Because when I went on the original site visit, most of it was a green space garden. You only had the footprint along the bottom and the actual convent building in the middle, but the majority of that was green space. Thank you.
Unfortunately, the aerial photograph that's available shows it with the building already demolished. I get what you mean. There are green areas on the site, but I suppose what I'd add to what I mentioned earlier was that it's not a massive site as well. I agree. We're not just talking about an infill development of a couple of dwellings here. You know, we're talking a couple of dozen, but on small sites, it is hard for us to say there's an area you can't develop when we're already saying there's an area you can't develop for ecology purposes. And because it's not a big greenfield site, to then say to the developer, there's further parts you can't develop, we're going to be shutting that development down and meaning that the site won't come forward. And I feel we do need to be looking at brownfield sites such as this within the town to try to take the pressure off, our greenfield sites.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. On page 19, Keith, which is all to do with the provision of affordable housing. 15.8, can you explain to me why the provision of affordable housing units on this site is problematic if sold to a single developer? Can you help me get my head around that, please? Thank you.
So originally, under the previous scheme, it was proposed that instead of it would still be the same developer building it, but all of the properties would be sold to one purchaser. And so if one purchaser wants to purchase the entire site, it would have been problematic to deliver, have one or two houses within that. However, under this current scheme, because the amount of contribution is significantly less, approximately, I think it was 74,000, was it you said? That's not enough for an entire dwelling, so we wouldn't require an on-site provision, and so now they're providing a monetary provision for off-site provision in this instance. But that's sort of a carryover from the previous report about why previously it was accepted to have it was proposed to have a off-site contribution rather than on-site provision.
Councillor Savage.
areas retained, and the question I had was where are they, and you pointed them out. But in line with the Town Council's concerns, there was a contradiction in 9.6 and 9.12 where Essex Badger Protection originally said that they weren't happy with it, and then in 9.12 it says there's no comments. Going further on, and I will get to the question very quickly, Chair, 17.36 said that there's licences from Natural England. Now my question relates purely to the badgers. Firstly, is that area now going to be able to sustain the badgers that are there with that development coming into fruition, or will they be removed, relocated, etc., etc.?
Well, on the first point about whether Essex Badger Group commented, they haven't commented on this proposal. I've deduced, and Councillor Skip also spotted, that this is, I think Canvey Council have copy-pasted from a previous response, perhaps. So, yeah, the Essex Badger Group didn't comment on this case. On the issue of moving badgers around, they will have to be moved about a bit while development takes place. But the ecologists who've been involved in this say that that's something that's possible to do. I mean, their foraging ground would be slightly reduced, but again, you know, badgers are adaptable. So.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is the school swimming pool. Windows overlooking children swimming. Is there anything that can be done about that? It doesn't ring right to me. You know, we're there to protect our children. We don't know who's going to buy these homes. And, you know, we need to do something about that. It's wrong that you can overlook a children's swimming pool.
Thanks. Yeah, the developer has picked up on that as well, and because it's a sensitive part of the school site. And I think Councillor Lillis picked up on it earlier. The windows that would have been to the living kitchen areas of some of the flats, they've put reveals to the windows and slightly angled the windows so you don't get a view northwards directly over the school swimming pool. I mean, there's a window there, but that's a secondary window, so we'd obscure glaze that. Hopefully, does that help? Like, if I go back to the layout, so that was here. So I appreciate it's quite small, but those kind of what look like bay windows, they're facing slightly downwards. They're not facing due west, and the school swimming pool's about here. So it's designed to prevent like people being able to so users of the swimming pool don't feel that their privacy has been compromised.
So the window's at an angle, so you've only got to put your head round and you can see the children swimming, basically.
Well, they put a reveal there as well, so you can see there's a window there, and then this is solid at the sides, so it wouldn't. Well, as far as we can tell, it's not going to afford direct views over the school swimming pool. As long as they build it like that, then it wouldn't be reasonable for us to refuse permission on the grounds that the school was going to be unduly overlooked.
Councillor Raycott.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask the officer under section 9.1, Anglo Water say that the foul sewerage or foul water system is satisfactory, but they have concerns about the surface water strategy. And it goes on to say that evidence should be discussed or shown to the planning department for you to agree surface water drainage system. Has that happened, and are you satisfied with their response?
Yeah, we've got an indicative drainage scheme which is broadly satisfactory. So the sewage works, Anglian Water tell us, has got adequate capacity, which we would defer to them on, because we're not experts on sewerage drainage. Surface water drainage, it's fairly standard for a Canvey site, where we don't use things like soakaways because the water doesn't go anywhere. It's an attenuated discharge, with storage tanks. The reason why there's a condition asking for a drainage scheme to be submitted, they don't quite go into enough detail. So the connection point to the main system, there's a little, we just need to know a little bit more about the discharge rates. But broadly, in principle, they have shown us an acceptable surface water drainage layout.
Councillor Savage.
Final question from myself. We mentioned the access in terms of roadways there. Is the actual road that goes into the development, can two cars pass each other there, or have they got a drop curb facility as such? Now, I'm thinking in terms of access for refuse lorries and fire engines, ambulances, etc., etc.
Yeah, the development's been designed to accommodate access by refuse collection vehicles and refuse collection lorry. It's a private road, so the new sign that's gone up says at St Joseph's Close says it's a private road and no parking. If parking did become a problem and the bin men couldn't get in, then we'd have to have a discussion. But on paper, it's been designed to accommodate large vehicles like that.
Councillor Howlett.
With regards to the house that is next to the school swimming pool, has that got any side windows? And if it has, are they permanently closed or obscured?
You say the house, do you mean here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a block of flats.
The flats, yeah.
As Councillor Watson and Councillor Lillis picked up and pointed out, there are some windows, but they're designed with like a reveal next to the window to prevent.
Talking about the back of the property.
Yeah.
The side.
Oh, this window here. It's a secondary window to the kitchen living area, so we would just put an obscure glazing condition on it.
And not opened?
Yeah, well, only a top fan light opening, just for ventilation.
Councillor Lillis.
Thank you, Chair. Final one for me as well. While you've got that diagram up, Keith, that's not the block of flats with the penthouse, is it? There's not there's nothing sitting on top of that. You could then look at the swimming pool, I suppose, is what I'm
No, that's right. This one's just a ground floor and a first floor.
Right.
The layout is pretty much replicated. The one that's part 3 stories, not near the school swimming pool.
Are there any other questions? The Planning Officer's recommendation is that planning permission be approved, subject to the details of a Section 106 agreement set out on page 30 of the report, and subject to the conditions and informative set out on pages 30 to 38 of the report, omitting condition 4, which has been deleted. For the purposes of debate, I move the recommendation. Councillor Gregg, as Vice Chairman, will you second?
I will second that.
Thank you very much. Please note that members should only speak once during the debate section of the meeting. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Skipp.
Thank you, Chairman. In my mind, this application is very little different from the previous application that we previously reviewed. As the officer mentioned, using his words, it's not a massive site, and we're putting a lot of units into this small area. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it this time either. And also, the parking issue. I know you mentioned about parking, but we do have the Essex parking standards which we've adopted, and this doesn't comply with those. So for those 2 reasons, I will be voting against it this time.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thornton.
Yes, planning practice guidance says that maximum parking standards can lead to poor quality development and congested streets, and provide greater freedom for local planning authorities to set parking standards appropriate to their areas. We haven't. This, I feel, is going to cause problems for around, and for that reason, I'm not going to be able to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. A little bit like the film 12 Angry Men, I will be supporting the application. I agree with what Keith has said. It's a prime brownfield site. If the wish is to protect Greenbelt, then these are the sort of applications that have come before us. I think that the reasons for refusal, by and large, have been addressed. I do still have some concerns about the badges and the reasons why they have vacated the sets, but I will be supporting it, the application that is. Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
And I fully support it as well. I echo exactly what Councillor Lewis has said. I think the affordable housing element and the payments disappointing, but that's the world we live in, unfortunately. I'm satisfied that the licences and the conditions set around the ecological areas are okay. I think we're in a world, unfortunately, where these kind of developments come along, and personally I think we have to embrace them when they come along to stop other areas being destroyed that we don't want destroyed. So, yeah, I think that's... I'll be accepting this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as much as it pains me that it's more building, obviously, in a small area, really, because I know it very well, I will be supporting, for the simple fact we are in the process of writing a residence plan. We are trying to save as much greenbelt as possible. This is a previously built-on area, so really, I can't see a reason to say against it, so I will be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes.
Sorry, thank you. Just in the questions that were raised about the obscure glazing to the north, realised when I was checking the conditions just now that condition 25 actually omits the light, which should have a line saying including obscure glazing to the northern elevation of the flat block. So any vote, I would hope that members would be okay if they are voting to approve it, would be subject to that line being added to that condition. Yes.
Would anyone else like to speak? Members, the motion before you is for approval. May I have a show of hands, please? Those for the motion. Those against the motion? And there are no abstentions. The motion is carried. And the application is approved subject to the details of section 106 and the conditions as set out in the report, with condition 4 deleted and the question of the windows added. Members, thank you very much indeed. Could I just take this opportunity on what feels like the last day of term to thank everyone here, all the members and indeed all the officers. That concludes the business for this evening. The meeting closed at 20 to 8. Thank you very much. Good evening.